reinvented herself once, but multiple times. She's always worked in male-dominated fields in financial services and technology markets. She's often been the only woman in the boardroom. Sometimes this was a good thing, but often she had to fight to be heard, to be taken seriously. She describes herself as a, quote, disruptor, a growth accelerator, and a creator of new business models. I also know her as a friend, a mother, an avid skier, cyclist, hiker. Joanne, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Amanda. I'm happy to be here.
So we're going to start with the phrase from your bio, and I actually had to look it up. I'm a little embarrassed, but I'm learning new things through doing this show, and that is C-suite executive. I now know what that means, but I want you to tell people, what does that mean when you see that on someone's resume?
Generally, it means that they have had a senior title somewhere between CFO, Chief Financial Officer, CEO, Chief Executive Officer, or COO, Chief Operating Officer. So they're at the pinnacle of the management of a company.
And you have kind of been in this space, this C-suite, if you will, for a very long time. So let's start from the beginning. Talk about how you first got into your first executive role in leadership.
So I think that the first time that I was actually in executive role was back in UBS, which was a global wealth management organization. And that would be prior to the turn of the millennium, so a while ago. And it was unique because it was a Swiss organization. I was in a technology role in a financial service, not just financial services, investment banking, which is probably the least female represented part of financial services. And I would say that the reason I got there was somewhat timing. They needed somebody to manage their global risk systems. But more importantly, I had a very, very good track record of problem solving and being thrust into difficult situations, pulling teams together, and coming out with a solution. So that was really my first major global executive role.
And you talk about the timing of that being, before the turn of the century, obviously. How was that to be a woman in that role? I mean, I'm sure that you were one of a few at that point.
Well, I was, in fact, the first female managing director out of 4,500 people in the logistics, so that would be IT and operation, finance, etc., part of the organization. And as times have changed, one of the things that I needed to do as I was being put up with promotion was hide the fact I was pregnant with my first child. And because I was fairly certain that I would not get that if they knew that I was about to become a mother for the first time. And in fact, after I got my promotion and then let management know that I was indeed 5 months pregnant, they asked me why I hadn't told them, because they would have given the position to someone else.
Unbelievable.
So times have changed, thank goodness, but yeah. I am old enough to have experienced that head on. I've been told that I can't have certain roles because I'm a woman and it would make men feel uncomfortable. So, I'm no stranger to bumping up against the glass ceiling. And it does me a world of good to know that things are getting better, though we still have a long, long way to go.
And I know at one point you were here in North Carolina and you were the COO of Red Hat. And that was at the time, a growing company. So what was that like, and why did you end up leaving there?
So I think a theme that goes throughout my life is I am a risk taker. And I think it's really important for women to assume that profile. And generally, women don't. And they tend to be much more conservative in terms of voicing their opinions. There's a lot of data that show if there's a job posting and it has 10 requirements and a woman meets 8 of them, they may not apply, but a man might meet 4 of them and apply. And I think there's a lot to be learned from that discrepancy. So when I was approached to come be the COO of Red Hat, it wasn't the glamorous job that people might think it was. The company had gone through the boom bust cycle of the dot-coms. Their stock had gone from a high flyer of over 100 down to 3. But I believed and had a strong opinion that the future of open source was bright. And so it was about a year of back and forth before I took the job. And ironically, at the time, people couldn't understand why I would leave a big job at a global bank to take that job. But what I really saw, even though I was very successful at UBS, was that I was considered on the cost side of a banking equation. And I would always advise women that they need to be on the revenue generating side of the equation. And so by making the move to Red Hat, where the business was the technology, I made a decided move to get to the revenue side of the equation. And so that's what I did. And it was a huge difference from the 150-year-old banking culture. It was the Wild West. They didn't even really have a business model when I joined. They were still selling boxed kit. You know, if you remember the way you used to put software in, they were selling that at CDW. I helped them develop, even while I was at UBS, the model that would eventually become the open source model that propelled them to great success. And so it was wild times, for sure. So why did I leave? Well, quite honestly, the culture was a difficult one. Again, going back to the female, I was the only female in the room. It was a very male-dominated culture. I mean, there were many more rules and regulations and banking that made some of the things that were surely beneath the surface come out. But it was no hold bars at Red Hat. And I had some ugly experiences from the get-go, like when the CEO announced to the company my new role as COO and what my responsibilities would entail, including being in charge of global operations. The head of sales responded to the mail to the whole company saying, "No, she's not."
Oh, so that was like the writing on the wall. I think, this show is really about reinvention and
Yeah,
transformation. And
yeah,
so one of the things you did when you left there was
yeah,
you created your own company. And you took all that knowledge that you had been amassing, right? And
yeah.
created something. How old were you when you started that, Cambridge Woods Partners?
Well, actually, before Cambridge Woods Partners, there was Axial Exchange.
Okay, okay,
And Axial Exchange was a health IT startup. And I was exactly 50 years old
okay.
when I started that. And again, somewhat born of necessity. Um, at the time I started Axial, it was the beginning of 2009. People can recall what the economy looked like then. Pretty disastrous.
I mean,
Um,
was it scary? You talk about taking risks. I mean, that was a risk, right?
that was really scary because all my other roles, I had an organizational name behind me that
Sure.
helped me be successful. And this was me, myself, and I. I had to go raise money. We had to, once we raised money, build software. We had to break into a very crowded field so people would know us. And there's no question that I learned a lot in that process. But again, I think the theme there was I saw an opportunity that came out of what was happening in 2009 and essentially government initiatives that were basically saying it was time to get the world on electronic health records and putting money into doctors, hospitals, et cetera, to get them to automate like other industries had. And so I saw that as an opportunity to take what I'd learned, to your point, and apply it in a different arena.
And, I think it's worth noting because so many other women are in this situation. I mean, you were also parenting. I mean, you had two daughters at home, so you were trying to build this company, but also be a mom. And, that's a lot.
And the sole wage earner, I might add. And that is a
That's
lot.
a lot. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of
Yeah.
responsibility. It's a lot of pulling you in different directions.
Yeah.
How did you manage that?
So I had made my peace long ago with the idea that as a working mom, that it was a plus to my children if I enjoyed what I was doing. And I did.
It's a
And
great
so,
point. Yeah.
yeah, and there's a lot of research to back that up. Being a working mom, staying at home, one is not better than the other. What is better than the other is loving what you're doing.
Hmm.
And that's what your kids need to see, you
And
know.
I'm
And so I,
sure it
yeah,
also shows, strong, confident women come from strong, confident women, I mean, to have that role model, I
yeah,
guess.
absolutely, absolutely. And so, I think one thing for working women in big jobs, you have to have help.
Hmm.
If you don't have a stay-at-home spouse, then you have to have nannies or really good daycare. You can't do it alone. And when I see women crack, it's when they try and do it all.
Absolutely. And, I think you didn't just stop there. You started another company. You've now moved on to lots of different projects. You're always all
Yeah.
over the place. I never know where you are, So what's the secret? I mean, how do you keep making these changes and transforming at this point in your life? Because a lot of women look at that and say, I couldn't do that, or I don't have the ability to do that. I'm stuck. I'm this age, or I've had this much of my
Yeah.
career and I'm not going to get anywhere else. I mean, what
Yeah.
would you say to those women?
I believe in Darwinism, change or die. Um, and that may
Okay,
sound
that's good.
no, that may sound a little tough, but what I would really say is that what I've learned over time is that I have been in some very, very difficult situations. Sometimes I have, been delivered what seem like knockout punches. But what I know, looking backwards, is I always get up. And I think that what helps me take risk is sort of that what's the worst thing that could happen exercise. And, once I convinced myself that if I lost my job, if, something happened to my support system, that I would go to Starbucks. And at Starbucks, I'd probably then be a manager. I know that I would do what it takes. And so that is not something that you're born with, that's something that you learn. And then you have to just sort of step outside yourself every once in a while and remind yourself that you can do that and you have evidence that you can do that. And women, I think, really do reinvent themselves almost naturally because of the life cycle of having kids and being at various stages. I think women are actually really good at reinventing themselves. They just don't often have the confidence that they're good at it.
And again, you talked about always being in traditionally male roles, And you do see that changing, but the change is still slow. It still hasn't
Yeah,
happened in terms of, top management being women. It seems like there's a lot of middle managers in companies
yeah.
that are women, but to get to those top C-suite jobs, it's still pretty challenging.
Yeah, I mean, I don't usually advocate the traditional work your way up the corporate ladder because it really doesn't work well for women on the whole. I mean, there are clearly exceptions and it's getting easier, but in general, I advise women, and I do spend a lot of time advising women on their careers, that they need to look for the unsolved problem that no one else is paying attention to. And go do your homework and start offering up a solution. You've got to make that situation where you can be in a role to control your own work destiny.
I love that. Look for the unsolved problem. I mean, it's kind of like, if you're an inventor, invent something that people
Yeah,
need or want that doesn't exist.
yeah,
So it's kind of the same thing. Look at a market, see what's missing, and fill it. I mean, that's some
yeah.
great advice. You do so many other things because I know you personally. So you're a skier, you're a
Yes.
cyclist, you're an outdoors person. Anything that you haven't done, what's on your bucket list?
So even though I have traveled the world a lot, I've almost always done so in a work capacity. And I would like to just do some traveling for fun. I would like to go to Vietnam and spend some time and really not only understand the history, but see how that country has rebuilt itself in a positive fashion, which it has. Um, on the physical front, I'd like to take up backcountry skiing and just get better at a lot of the things that that I'm average at. So, because what I do find and why I like so much physical pursuit is that if you stick with it, you generally progress. And, you know, that I think in turn plays into the whole work dynamic. When you start building that confident sort of positive reinforcement, um, then your overall feeling that you can get things done improves.
And you're
Um,
still working full time. I mean, you're still at it.
I am definitely still at it. I would say that the next stage of my career, I think, is to get do more board of director work, which is very different than being in the C-suite. And the difference, as it's sometimes said, it's noses in, hands off. And in my first publicly traded board of director position, where I was an external board member as opposed to an internal one like at Red Hat, um, it was really kind of hard for me at first because I'm so used to going in and fixing things. And it's not your job on the board to go in and fix things. It's your job to set the agenda and help guide others to
Other
do that.
people to do that. Well,
Yeah.
I think that you would be very good at that. So, good luck with that. And Joanne, thank you so much for sharing this. I think there's a lot of women out there that can relate to, your experiences and are trying to figure out what their next steps are and their next chapters. And I think it's just important to remind them that there is a next chapter and maybe one more or another one after that. So,
Yeah,
um,
always, always. I mean, I think the only other thing I'd add is be curious. You know, I'm genuinely interested in learning things. And even when they're somewhat daunting, like my next agenda item is really breaking down this whole world of AI into a way that I can understand how it can be helpful.
that's a good one. That's a good one. Well,
Yep.
Joanne, thank you so much. I
Sure.
really
Mhm.
appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks, Amanda.